uneventfully. The family unpacked boxes, set up furniture, and introduced themselves to neighbors. Everything seemed perfect until Jack began noticing something strange. It started on the fourth night. The house was silent. Emily and Tommy were already asleep, and Jack was working late in the living room, reviewing documents for his job. Around 2 a.m, he heard it, a faint sound coming from above. He paused, listening closely. The noise stopped. Shaking it off as the house settling, Jack returned to his work. Emily whispered, waking up from the noise. "Yeah, it's coming from the attic," Jack replied, trying to sound calm. "Probably mice or a raccoon. I'll check it out tomorrow." The next morning, armed with a flashlight, Jack opened the attic door. A cold draft greeted him as he climbed the creaky wooden stairs. The attic smelled of dust and something else, an oddly sweet, decaying scent that made his stomach churn. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary. Wooden beams crisscrossed the ceiling, cobwebs hung in the corners, and a few old boxes were scattered around. But then, he noticed something unusual in the far corner, a dusty leather suitcase. Jack approached it cautiously, the sweet scent growing stronger. He knelt down and opened the latches. The suitcase creaked open, revealing a collection of faded, yellowed photographs. The photos showed a family, a man, a woman, and 3 children. Their expressions were unnervingly grim, their eyes hollow, almost lifeless. It was as if the camera had captured them in the midst of something terrible. Beneath the photos was a single, tiny child's shoe. It was worn and tattered, and the same sickly sweet smell seemed to emanate from it. Jack's hands began to tremble. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound came from behind him. He spun around, shining his flashlight toward the corner of the attic. The beam revealed nothing but shadows. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. There was no answer, but just as he turned back toward the stairs, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Jack froze. In the dim light, he saw something move, a faint, indistinct shape shifting in the corner. Then came a hoarse whisper. "You've made a mistake." Heart racing, Jack bolted for the stairs, nearly tripping in his rush to get out. He slammed the attic door behind him and shoved a chair under the knob, as if that would be enough to keep whatever it was from coming down. The rest of the night, he sat in the living room, wide awake, listening for any further noises. The following morning, he confided in Emily. She laughed nervously, dismissing his story as a combination of exhaustion and an overactive imagination. But the sounds from the attic continued. Several nights later, as the family slept, Jack was woken by even louder footsteps. This time, they seemed deliberate, heavy, and unnervingly close. Gripping a flashlight, he decided to confront whatever or whoever it was. Climbing the stairs once more, Jack pushed open the attic door. A freezing draft hit him, far colder than before. The suitcase was no longer in the corner. Instead, it sat in the middle of the room. Swallowing his fear, Jack approached the suitcase. Inside was something new, a clump of black, muddy hair. The sight made his stomach churn. As he stood there, the attic light began to flicker. He turned toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. In the darkness, he heard the same rasping breaths from before, this time much closer. The light flickered on for a split second, and Jack's blood ran cold. Fresh footprints, bare, human footprints, were stamped into the dusty floor, leading directly toward him. When the light flashed again, Jack felt the presence closing in. His flashlight dropped to the ground, and he whispered to himself, "This can't be real." Jack thought that after the attic incident, things would settle down. But he was wrong. Unease began creeping into their home again, this time focusing on their 5-year-old son, Tommy. At first, it seemed harmless. One morning, while Emily was helping Tommy get dressed, he looked up at her with a bright smile and said, "My friend really likes my room." Emily, assuming it was just an imaginary friend, responded playfully, "Oh, what's your friend's name?" Tommy paused for a moment before whispering, "He doesn't have a name, but he watches me at night." Emily felt a chill run down her spine, but brushed it off as a typical childhood phase. However, as the days went by, Tommy's conversations with his friend became more frequent. At times, they were accompanied by laughter or low murmurs, always when Tommy was alone in his room. One evening, while walking past his door, Emily overheard him whispering. She quietly pushed the door open, expecting to find him playing with his toys. Instead, she saw Tommy sitting cross-legged on the floor, his gaze fixed on the far corner of the room. "Tommy, who are you talking to?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "My friend," Tommy replied casually, pointing to the corner. "He's standing right there." Emily turned her head toward the corner, but it was empty, except for a shadow that seemed oddly darker than the rest of the room. That night, she told Jack what she had seen. "He's probably imagining things," Jack said, trying to reassure her. "Kids see shadows and make up stories all the time. Don't worry about it." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A few nights later, as she was brushing her teeth, a new terror struck her. On the fogged bathroom mirror, faint words appeared. "He's here!" Emily's hands trembled as she called Jack, who rushed upstairs. But by the time he arrived, the words had already vanished. "You're stressed," he said, though even he couldn't hide his unease. The next afternoon, Jack was working in the backyard when he stumbled upon something buried just beneath the dirt. Kneeling down, he unearthed an old porcelain doll. It was cracked, filthy, and missing one eye. The remaining eye, however, seemed strangely vivid, as though it were alive. He shuddered, but dismissed it as a forgotten toy left by the previous owners. Tossing it aside, he returned to work. That night, an unnatural cold filled the house. Jack and Emily woke to the sound of muffled giggles coming from Tommy's room. They rushed in to find him sitting upright in bed, staring at the door with wide scream echoed through the halls, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. Jack grabbed Emily and Tommy, and they ran to the car. As they drove away, Emily glanced back at the house. In the attic window, she saw it. A tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes and a crooked, inhuman smile watching them leave. They thought they had escaped, but deep down, Jack knew the entity wasn't bound to the house. It was bound to them.